Okay, well, I mean, obviously what is unfolding here, it really probably started to unravel with the irrefutable and undeniable evidence surrounding Jimmy Savile. And of course, whilst Savile's activities are absolutely heinous, obviously what is now being revealed is that, he wasn't just a pedophile. He was very much into necrophilia. I mean, he was into amputees. I mean, basically, his sexual predatorial behavior was sort of all-encompassing. And, obviously, what has become very apparent is that there had to have been a significant number of people, in every aspect of Savile's life, not just in terms of his work with the media, but in terms of his work with the various hospitals, which was always presented as, his charity work. But of course, there were clearly ulterior motives for him working in these hospitals. And, now people are coming forward. And it's not just a question of coming forward after the event, now that maybe they could put their head above the parapet. I mean, those people do feel more comfortable, obviously, in telling their story. But what is more disturbing is the people who said, look, we actually reported this. We reported this to our management. We reported it, and took it as high up the chain as we could. And, we were basically either laughed at or basically told to shut up. For fear of risking our jobs. And what is also emerging is that the security services, had a pretty good idea what was going on, if not detailed knowledge. And they also knew that Savile, who had a program, by the way, he used to do a kids program called Jim or Fix It. And I mean, it's almost the establishment giving the population the finger, because it would seem that, all of the establishment knew that Savile's role was to provide them with the means by which they could fulfill their sexual fantasy. And of course, Savile's connections, both with the political elite. I mean, he spent something like 10 Christmases with at Chequers with various prime ministers, mainly Margaret Thatcher. Of course, he was very, very friendly with the royal family, and not least Prince Charles. And as somebody observed the other day, the Queen's Honours List is actually starting to bear a remarkable resemblance to the sex offenders register. And, is this coincidence? Okay, one of the reasons, Warren, that it's come about right now is because more and more people have been talking about the suppression. We have known about the magnitude of this problem for about 6 years now, when we were approached by a serving police officer who told an absolutely incredible story, which, of course, has now absolutely been confirmed by what has come out in recent days. And he reported that some years ago, he had been involved in an investigation into the systemic abuse of children in care in state children's homes in the Metropolitan Police area of London. And over a period of 2 years, the team visited every single care home in the Metropolitan London area. And what they were able to establish was that there was indeed considerable evidence of systemic abuse. In other words, children, boys and girls, as young as 11, basically leaving the homes on a Friday evening. In many cases, they were picked up in either minicabs or in some cases even chauffeur-driven cars, and basically disappearing for the weekend and then being dropped back on either Sunday night or Monday morning. Anyway, having spent 2 years on this investigation, This particular officer then took his family on vacation. And when he came back from vacation, in his own words, he said he'd never seen so much top brass of the police in one place at any one time, and it was all in his office. And when he got into his office, he was sat down and he was told, that report that you submitted before you went on vacation, that report doesn't exist. And what they gave him was a script so that he could actually share this false story with people if they asked him what he'd been working on for the previous 2 years. So, I mean, this particular individual has been champing at the bit for this information to come out. And obviously, you know, one of the major campaigners on child abuse in the UK is a guy called Bill Maloney. And Bill Maloney is, you know, a victim of the children's homes himself. And so for much of his adult life, he's been campaigning to bring this into the public domain. And, you know, his evidence is so compelling that, of course, the mainstream media and the establishment daren't even acknowledge his existence. So they don't even try to ridicule him for fear of bringing attention to his work. And now, of course, what's going to happen is more and more people, and I would encourage, you know, anyone listening to this to check out the work of Bill Maloney, because this is absolutely his focus. I mean, he's a single issue campaigner, and that is on the systemic abuse of children in care homes in the UK. And his work is, you know, obviously, the fruits of his work are now being born. Like I said, you know, the critical element here is that, you know, we know that this goes way back. You know, it was almost an accepted part of British society, which just goes to show how sick our society really was and is in many cases. But I mean, you know, so some of the media, some of the more right-wing media have been running articles about, you know, stuff that went on in the 19th century or the early 20th century, and it was nothing more than an extension of the sort of boarding school type situation, you know, where boys would be boys and, you know, because they were a lot easier to access than girls. So it would breed homosexuality. And of course, once somebody was part of that loop, you know, back in the early part of the 20th century, and probably even right up through the latter part of the 20th century as well, they were controllable. Because if they had this skeleton that, you know, they didn't want to be dragged out of the closet, then, you know, they would effectively do whatever they were told. So, you know, that's why it's always been acknowledged that, you know, there were many people in senior positions in government who weren't actually decision makers. They were simply the front man for the powers behind it, and they were controlled because of their sexual deviance. Well, and obviously what is now becoming very apparent that, you know, through the last probably 50 so years, maybe ever since Second World War, this abuse of children, and particularly children in care, because obviously they were easy targets, has been absolutely systemic. And like you said, you know, the Haute de Grange investigation into the alleged murder of children on Jersey in the children's home there, and the investigating police officer, the initial investigating police officer, having confirmed that they had found fragments of children's skulls in the cellars of Haute de Grange, he was removed from the case, and he was replaced by another officer who was appointed by the state, and within literally days of taking over the assignment, he reported back and said, "Oh, no. It was a misunderstanding. It's not fragments of skull. It's fragments of coconut shell." And of course, you know, the vast majority, enormous difference, but the vast majority of the British public didn't fall for that. But the media just picked it up because, you know, the state obviously controls the media. You know, I mean, the British media is more controlled than the Soviet media was at the height of Soviet Russia. You know, the British media, BBC, which is now known as the British Buggering Corporation, or alternatively the British Bullshit Corporation, but it has very, very little credibility. And this is why, you know, more and more people are turning to the alternative media to get their information. Because once again, what is proven here is that the information that's been put out by the alternative media over the past 20 years, basically since obviously we had the opportunity through the access to the internet, is proving to be a lot more accurate than the stuff, the propaganda, effectively, that's put out by the mainstream media. And yesterday, I mean, David Cameron made a massive shake-up of the government, and you know, already there is you know, considerable, I should say, speculation that some of those moves that he's made in government are related to taking people out of the firing line before information about their sexual predation actually comes to into the public domain.